Before sunrise, the desert held its breath, and the wind stopped moving as if it knew something terrible was about to happen. The men who stole her sat near the fire, smiling, laughing, counting money, believing the night belonged to them. They thought she was weak because she was quiet. They thought fear lived inside her because she did not scream. Bound hands, bruised skin, and tired eyes did not mean defeat, but they never understood that. Far away, the sky slowly changed color, and with every second, something dangerous was waking up. Pain had sharpened her focus. Memories had hardened her heart. She did not pray for rescue because she was the rescue. While the men waited for daylight, she waited for the right moment. By the time the first light touched the fence, the desert was no longer silent. A shadow stood there, steady and fearless. They had stolen a woman, but what came for them was a legend. She was known as a quiet Apache woman, someone people rarely noticed and quickly forgot. Yet the land recognized her footsteps and the wind remembered her breath. Her eyes were strong but never loud, her face calm even when danger stood close, and her walk carried no fear because fear had never ruled her life. Outsiders watched her and made a dangerous mistake, believing silence meant weakness and calm meant surrender. They did not see the scars hidden beneath tradition, or the lessons carved into her soul by loss and survival. Apache blood ran deep in her veins, carrying pride older than the desert itself and strength shaped by fire, hunger, and war. She had learned to endure without complaint and observe without reaction. While others spoke to prove power, she stayed quiet to protect it. Those who chose her believed she was an easy target, never realizing that some storms arrive without warning, and the deadliest ones make no sound before they strike. They moved closer as the night deepened, shadows stretching across the sand, while the quiet Apache woman continued forward without changing her pace, unaware that fate was tightening its grip behind her, the wind carrying strange footsteps that did not belong to the land. And when the hands finally reached her, they came fast and rough, stealing breath and balance in one sudden motion, dragging her into darkness before a single cry could escape her lips, the stars above watching as if helpless witnesses to a choice already made, her heart pounding not with panic but with sharp awareness. Ropes cut into her wrists and a cloth stole her sight, the men whispering with careless confidence, laughing softly as if the world owed them obedience, believing the night itself had granted permission. Her body pressed against the cold ground as she listened carefully, counting breaths, memorizing voices, feeling every movement with painful clarity, knowing fear would be the one mistake she could not afford, the desert air heavy with dust and distant memories as she was pulled upward and forced to walk, her feet stumbling yet her mind standing tall, each step taken against her will, planting something deeper inside her chest, not weakness but resolve. The men spoke of profit and distance, of borders and fences, never once speaking her name, never once wondering who she truly was, and that ignorance settled over them like a curse. She felt the wagon sway as it carried her farther from familiar ground, the rhythm steady, almost mocking, while the smell of leather and sweat filled her senses. Her breathing slowed deliberately as she leaned into stillness, letting them believe she had already broken. The night grew colder, pressing against her skin, yet her spirit burned with memories of lessons learned long ago, of patience taught through silence, of strength shaped by loss. Her wrists ached, but her mind remained free, measuring time by the sound of hooves and changing wind, understanding that survival was not about speed but timing. The men argued quietly, tension slipping between their words, unaware that every sound fed her awareness, unaware that the woman they carried was not surrendering but preparing. The moon dipped lower, and with it their guard softened, confidence turning careless, laughter returning as they believed the hardest part was over. But beneath the blindfold her eyes stayed sharp, her senses alive, absorbing the world even without sight. The ropes rubbed skin raw, yet she welcomed the pain as proof she was still present. Still fighting in ways they could not see, the wagon slowed near unfamiliar land, the smell of wood and iron creeping into the air, a fence close enough to sense, and in that moment something shifted, not outside but within her, a calm certainty settling deep, because she knew this was where their mistake would begin, where the night would stop protecting them, and where the quiet Apache woman would no longer be carried by fate, but would start shaping it herself. The night air pressed against her skin as memory rose inside her like a slow fire, not as a choice, but as a force she had learned to control long ago, because this moment demanded truth even if no one else would hear it, and in that darkness her past walked beside her with steady footsteps, taking her back to a time when she was younger, smaller, and already surrounded by loss, when her village stood quiet after smoke cleared and voices were gone, when she learned that survival was not a gift but a skill earned through discipline, because the man who found her did not ask her name or her pain, he only saw focus in her eyes and patience in her breath, and he taught her without softness, not with kindness but with purpose, showing her how silence could be louder than anger and how waiting could be stronger than speed. Every lesson carved into her mind through long days under harsh sun and colder nights beneath open sky, where she learned to move without sound, think without panic, and act without hesitation. And even then he reminded her she was not becoming a weapon, but a guardian of her own fate, because power without control destroys itself. And she listened, not because she trusted him, but because she trusted the land that shaped them both. And as years passed, she learned the weight of steel, the language of distance, and the cost of pulling a trigger, not through pride but through responsibility. And when the lessons ended, he left without farewell, knowing she did not need protection anymore, only purpose. And now in this stolen darkness, those teachings returned with sharp clarity, guiding her breath, steadying her pulse, reminding her that fear belonged to those who misunderstood her silence, because the men nearby believed they had taken something fragile, unaware they had carried danger into their own shadow. And as she stood restrained yet unbroken, she allowed them to think she was defeated, because that mistake was their final comfort, and she held still, counting seconds by the rhythm of her heart, feeling the earth beneath her as an ally rather than a prison, understanding that survival was not about strength alone, but timing. And the night continued to move while she waited, calm, prepared, and resolved, knowing that when the moment arrived it would not come with noise or warning, only certainty, because she was no longer the woman they believed they had chosen. She was the result of every loss she endured, every lesson she mastered, and every step that led her here, and nothing about her presence was accidental anymore. Night wrapped the land as she lay tied beneath a cold sky, feeling dust on her skin and rope biting her wrists, yet her mind stayed sharp and controlled, because fear never ruled her thoughts. It only sharpened them, and while the men laughed nearby, careless and loud, she listened to every breath, every careless step, every moment of pride that made them weak, knowing patience was her strongest weapon, remembering the lessons carved into her spirit long ago, lessons about timing, silence, and choosing survival over rage. So she waited as the fire burned lower and shadows grew longer, letting pain fade into focus, using the slow rhythm of her breath to steady shaking muscles, because panic would betray her, and she refused to break, not here, not now, not ever. Then when sleep softened their senses and the desert wind masked soft movement, she shifted her hands just enough to loosen the knot against a rough stone hidden beneath her palm, grinding fibers slowly, carefully ignoring the sting as skin tore, because freedom demanded sacrifice. And when the rope finally weakened, she paused again, counting heartbeats, feeling the night listen with her. Then she slipped free without sound, feet touching earth like memory, body low, eyes alert, moving not away but through the darkness with purpose, using shadows as allies, reading the land like an old friend. Each step guided by instinct sharpened through years of hardship, until distance separated her from careless confidence behind her. Yet she did not run wild or reckless, because escape was not about speed, it was about control, and she chose her path with calm intention, circling wide, reclaiming what was taken piece by piece, gathering strength from the quiet, letting anger stay buried beneath resolve, and when dawn hinted faintly at the horizon, she stopped, hidden among stone and brush, watching the camp from afar, heart steady, breath slow, knowing the night had changed her position, but not her purpose, because survival was only the beginning, not the ending, and justice was not fueled by noise or fury, but by balance restored. And as the sky shifted from black to deep blue, she rose, silently leaving no trace behind, carrying with her the weight of memory and the fire of will, stepping forward into the coming light with certainty, because she was no longer bound, and the desert itself seemed to hold its breath as she disappeared toward destiny, ready for what awaited beyond the dark. The pale light of morning touched the dust as she reached the edge of the camp, her boots silent, her breath steady, every sense awake, the fence rising before her like a final line between fear and fate, and she paused only once, not from doubt but from memory, feeling the weight of all she had survived settle into calm focus, her hands moving with trained ease as she checked the rifle, the familiar balance grounding her heart, while inside the camp men stirred, unaware that the quiet watching them carried a will sharper than steel. The wind shifted and carried her presence like a warning. One man looked up and froze, sensing something wrong before understanding arrived. And in that moment she stepped forward into the open, not hiding, not rushing, letting the dawn reveal her strength, her eyes locked on the fence line where shadows broke and truth stood clear. Fear traveled faster than sound as whispers spread, confusion replacing confidence, their laughter gone, their arrogance falling away. She remained still, letting silence speak louder than threats, the desert holding its breath as if waiting for her decision. She raised the rifle not with anger but with purpose, each movement controlled, every action shaped by lessons learned long ago. A warning shot cracked the air and struck the fence post cleanly, not meant to harm but to announce that escape was over. Panic followed as men scrambled, some reaching for weapons, others backing away, yet she did not chase chaos. She commanded it, her voice finally breaking the silence, low and steady, telling them to drop everything and listen, the authority in her tone leaving no space for argument. One by one they obeyed, realizing too late that the woman they dismissed now held their fate. She stepped closer, eyes never leaving them, explaining without cruelty that choices carry weight, that the land remembers every step taken upon it, her words sinking deeper than threats ever could. The sunrise painted the sky as she lowered the rifle slightly, not in surrender but control, giving them a chance to walk away with lessons instead of regret. Some fled, others stood frozen, but none dared challenge her, and when the moment ended, she turned from the fence without looking back, her figure moving toward the open desert, leaving behind shaken men and a story that would spread beyond the camp, carried by fear, respect, and disbelief, because by sunrise they understood the truth, that power does not always shout. Sometimes it waits quietly, and when it stands at the fence, nothing remains the same. As the last echo of fear faded into the open land, she lowered the rifle without a word and let the morning wind pass across her face, feeling neither victory nor relief, but a quiet weight lifting from her chest as the fence creaked behind her, and the camp fell into stunned silence, the kind that follows when truth arrives too fast to deny. And she turned away knowing that justice did not need an audience, only balance, and with steady steps she moved back toward the rising light where the desert stretched wide and honest, every footprint reminding her that survival had always been her teacher and choice her strength. And as she walked, her thoughts did not return to anger, but to the long road that shaped her hands and her heart, to the lessons carved through hardship and patience, to the nights when fear whispered lies and she answered with calm breath instead of panic, and the land seemed to recognize her resolve as birds lifted from the brush, and the sky softened into gold. And with each step the past loosened its grip, replaced by something stronger than revenge, something quieter than pride, a sense that her story would move forward without chains or shadows, and far behind her the men left standing would carry the memory longer than any wound, learning too late that power is not loud, and legends are not born from cruelty but from endurance, and she did not look back because she knew that survival meant choosing the future over the moment. And as the sun climbed higher, she reached the edge of familiar ground where people once walked freely, and where her spirit felt whole again, and there she paused not to mourn but to breathe, letting the warmth settle into her bones as if the land itself welcomed her return, and she understood that the story would travel without her name, changing with every telling, growing sharper or softer depending on who spoke it, yet the truth would remain untouched because it lived inside her rather than in words. She accepted that legends are not claimed but earned through restraint and courage, and as she continued onward she became smaller against the vast horizon, not fading but blending into the strength of the earth that shaped her, leaving behind nothing but silence and the certainty that the wrong choice had finally met the right woman, and that the desert would remember not the sound of fear but the calm footsteps of someone who refused to be broken. When the sun climbed higher, the desert breathed again, and the fence stood quiet, holding the memory of what had passed. She lowered her weapon, not in victory, but in peace, because her heart carried no hunger for praise. She walked away with steady steps, knowing the land had witnessed her truth and accepted it. The wind carried her name without sound, and the sand covered every trace except the lesson left behind. Those who watched learned that strength does not shout, and justice does not beg. She returned to her people before shadows grew long, carrying silence like a shield and dawn like a promise. No songs followed her, yet stories traveled far, shaped by fear and respect. Long after, men remembered the fence at sunrise and chose caution over cruelty. The desert kept her secret, and she kept her freedom. In that balance, the legend rested alive, breathing, and unbroken.